Hey.
This is my special guest. We'll introduce in a moment, but welcome to War Hero to Superhero, helping military, veterans, and first responders transform their lives from the bedroom to the boardroom. We, last month, got COVID. So if you were watching March's episodes, we were in the bedroom and doing nothing there, if you know what I mean.
Not much was happening.
Not much was happening.
We were not well.
Not well, just laying there and everything else.
We still have, pieces of it.
We still have remnants. So, but with War Hero to Superhero, we have gone over and now integrated a new guest host. So I'm going to introduce my wife, and then she'll give a few minutes, and then we'll get into the topic at hand. So, Michelle, wifey.
I'm wifey, aka Michelle Faust, and I am the wife of Daniel Faust, almost 15 years, and I am happy to be here and happy to be a co-host because we work well together, and this time I'm here. So,
all right.
That was quick few minutes.
There we go. So she'll be here as much as possible. She has now recommitted. It's funny. A couple years ago when we had her on, we had a 250% increase. So I guess my ugly mug with thorough brow, that's not enough for you guys. So we'll just go over and bring her back. So we want to thank you for going over and joining. And today we're in the bedroom. So each week, if you never watched War Hero to Superhero, we focus transforming your life from the bedroom to the boardroom. So week 1 is in the bedroom. Week 2, we transform your life in the living room through content and message and also guests. And then we go over into the boardroom in week 3 by talking about how to transform your life coming out of the military or out of the first responder world in the boardroom. And then we do interviews in the 4th week on this show. So if you ever want to be interviewed live, the 4th week of each and every month, we do that. Now, when we have a 5th week, a special week that has 5 weeks in a row, don't ask me how the calendar does it, but then we do a superhero sanctum. So if you are a subject matter expert that want to get your wisdom out there to military veterans and first responders, please go over and get back with us. We do have a calendar for you to go over and to book. So the 4th week and 5th week, if you want us to uplift your brand and to uplift your message, we would love to go and interview. But this week we are in the bedroom, and it is April. So we are talking about rewrite the story. And we're going to talk about the bedroom specifically and how we went over and rewrite the story, because our story almost went to crap really super quick.
It's a really good way to put it.
Yep.
So do you want me to give them the preference on how our relationship started or
wherever you want to go? I tend to lead and she
talks. I'm going to give the lightning fast. Basically, we met June 18th, 2006. We got married December 18th, 2006. If you do the math, we only knew each other for 6 months. This is not a recommendation for anybody that's out there dating. Don't do this.
Or go faster.
No, don't do this. But basically, we got married. Fast forward, we didn't know we had orders, and which is for non-military types, it's a piece of paper that says you're going somewhere as a military member. We had orders, and we were pregnant on the same day.
I was deploying those type of orders.
Yeah. So basically, we didn't have a honeymoon. We didn't have time to get to know each other. And then he went to another country. I think it was UAE at the time, and did you go to a water park on that deployment?
She's actually jealous. I went to the water park in many other places, but that's another story.
That's ridiculous. I'm a water park on a deployment. I'm it was a blessing, but I'm this is ridiculous.
Hey, Queen
Kimmy, we love you.
The boss effect out there. So if you want to go get your boss effect on, go listen to Queen Kimmy. Thank you.
So yes, he comes home and I'm 9 months pregnant. So we don't know each other. And we now have a child coming into the world. And so basically, military / just got married / no honeymoon / no time to get to know each other / now child. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that that is a bad mix, and there's not probably a good outcome going to come. So we had our first, and then the doctors were like, you can't get pregnant again. It's fine. No. My first and my second kid are 16 months apart. Y'all can do the math on that. That is how that went down. So now we have another child, 2 kids, and a lot more military things happening. I think we had a couple moves in there.
We moved 2 base housings, had a major job change, and then when we went from 2 to the next set,
Yeah, because we thought it was one. Because we were like, let's have one. Because he didn't want to have a third child. He was like, we're done. I don't want to have any more kids. And then he's like, I'm being selfish. I'll just try for one more. So one more child. Game of twins. It was like, surprise, 2 for 1.
We don't actually try. We just be intimate. We're not like, hey, basal monitor and everything else. You know, everything's right.
Yeah, people are like, did you plan this? I was like, no, but it's a blessing, but I don't recommend. I mean, I recommend kids, but I do not recommend the way we did this. So basically, we had so much stuff compiled that, like, the first 7 years of my marriage to this beautiful man was an absolute dumpster fire of just immaturity, not knowing each other, and just toxicity from both ends. And I've told other people this, so I'm sure he's willing to share this. He was verbally abusive. I had no self-esteem. I didn't realize how I was supposed to be treated. I had no good examples growing up. He has, I mean, maybe at some point he'll share his story at some point, but he's got just as much brokenness on his end of the family. He's got 2 broken people coming together, producing tiny humans, and now trying to live a life together. And we all, I mean, divorce, separation, just those were common words in our vocabulary. Yeah. So we are honored to be able to sit here today to have this conversation with you, because right now I have the best marriage to an amazing man. But what you guys see with my husband and I is only like the tip of the iceberg to a massive pile of crud.
Thanks for the compliment. That's how it's the best marriage ever. Pass the debit card.
I just transfer the funding on the phone.
Yeah, we do a 21st century for those great comments, right? You pay for those great comments. You're like, if you swipe, you'll get it right.
And I mean, we know that we're Air Force, and we know that some of you guys are Marines out there, some of you guys are Army out there, and we're not here to compare the branches, and we're not here to say, hey, Air Force is better than whatever. Like everybody, every military spouse out there, I don't care what branch you are, is a rock star. And whether you have a husband gone for 4 months, or 6 months, or 18 months,
or a wife,
it is a challenge no matter how you put a lens on that. Like I don't care who you are. It's like being a single parent, but not being a single, because you have a paycheck coming in, but you have no spouse to provide any assistance, help. Can't talk to them, and you know it's just an odd situation.
Yep. So going into that, we got out of active duty. So I didn't realize I was verbally abusive, but I was a person that always made myself look right. I didn't realize I was gaslighting. I just found out about that recently. I'm like, man, I was doing that for like 7 years.
And I like to be right too. So if you get 2 people that like to be right, that's generally not a good
I don't care about being right. I don't like looking stupid. So I would, just like when I was a kid, go over and you have that junk that has like, for me personally, it was verbal abuse in the home, and then it was at school, and then then I got sexually assaulted throughout the years of 8 to 15, with a parent's divorce culminating around that 14 or 15 year. And I was about 13, and then around 15, then my brother died. So take those 7 years and compact that. And I had no faith then, but if you had a faith, that was the last straw to the back. So I threw God out the window, and the next 5 years was basically pursue what this goes over and does. Listen to the heart and hope everything goes right. Some things are winners, some things are losers. And then I went into the military, and I was single for 5 to 7 years. I did come to a faith at 20, but never really, only worked through the surface junk out. So when it came to my wife, then it's like, here's the dumpster dive of all the junk, including,
there was a lot of junk.
Yeah, and that's what I was bringing to the table. So anytime her cup was bumped and my cup was bumped like this, what happens when a cup is bumped? It's what's inside it, what gets bumped out. If you have clean water in that cup, or clean Gatorade, you'll go over and spill clean Gatorade. But if you have dirty Gatorade in there, or dirty water spilled out. So that was me. My cup was filthy. It was disgusting and everything else. And it would just get bumped, either inadvertently or purposely. Sometimes, like when you also get into arguments, you tend to bump cups more. And we played like otters when we had the good time in the relationship, and then we fight like Doberman pinchers afterwards in that particular regard. And then we did the, if you ever read the book, The DNA of Relationships, we did the cycle of abuse. It would go over and tension would go over and build, and then it would go over and explode. And then we would do the patch management through sex, through buying stuff, through words of affirmation, and the worst part is I was manipulating the gospel and everything else. And again, I wasn't like actively thinking, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go do this cycle of abuse.
So many things were on just a basis of just doing and not a lot of processing. And there's all this stuff going on, and we're just in the cycle of this is happening. And you go through a situation like, I just was here. Why is it happening again? It just kept over and over and over again.
So it came around that 2011 came by. So we had a set of twins. So we have 4 kids.
4 kids.
Ranging now from 11 to 13. They're upstairs right now and waiting for popcorn and movies. So we'll be on here for like another 20, 22 minutes, just so you know, and then we're going to punch. So unless you're going to come to babysit, we're going to punch off at that time. Just give you a heads up. But long story short, we had those 4 kids, and now we're at Wright Pat Air Force Base. I thought God's leading me to either work with the chaplaincy or work with mental health. Chaplaincy didn't work out. The guy told me how much I'd be pissed off and angry and bitter, especially being the religious affairs or chaplain assistant, whatever branch you're from. And I went into mental health. Woo! Well, that's just nuts. You have 4 kids, you're going through your brokenness and everything else, and now you're working in mental health, dealing with everybody else's brokenness. And I had the 3 days in, and Queen Kimmy can relate to this, I had an Army soldier went over and was an 8 out of 10 suicidal, had a knife actively on them. I'm helping de-escalate in my 3rd day being on base after tech school, and then they send me to a commander's call. And then how am I supposed to deal? So now I got not just my own junk and her own junk. Now I'm trying to help people through their junk, because I'm like, that's my heart, but I'm not dealing with my heart at home. We tend to do that as Americans. That's just my evaluation. We go over and we try to fix things in the boardroom, but then the living room, bedroom, we kind of tolerate until it gets eliminated, Like this time of year, this is when people most start getting divorced. So, and the funny part is that's when I really threatened divorce in that time.
Mysterious.
So 2010, get told I'm going to get deployed. I'm the new guy. I have a broken elbow. Yeah, we're going to send you. What? I'm like, new guy plus busted elbow. You'll be fine by July. You'll be fine. I wasn't fine. I wasn't fine for a long time, but at least that was the only truthful thing that was in the relationships, is that at least I wasn't wearing a mask. I basically told everybody how much it sucked. That was probably the only authentic thing that I had going for me. So I go over and deploy again. Now she's home with 4 kids.
And these are infants.
All infants.
Everybody was under 2. Well, yeah. Under 3.
2011, William was 3.5, and then Faith was 2, and the twins were a year.
I had 3 non-walking children.
All 4 in diapers still.
So, I don't even have memories of that time frame, to be completely clear. I mean, it was just get through it.
And I'm the memory guy, so I have everything. So, I just realized that, But go over and deploy, then you find out you suck at the job. Like, I was good for 6 weeks, but then somebody new came in. So if you ever been deployed and you work with a great person, awesome, like on the first part, but then you have somebody rotate in to take that spot that you're working with. And now they're like, hey, you're going to go from admin to mental health counseling. And now we're going to triple our patient load. And everybody's coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan and everything else, and they're broken or hurt. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And coming in every 2 to 3 days. And we have to evaluate if they're suicidal, homicidal, where they're at, and then make sure that they're not that. And then we have to triage them to get them to a point that they are mentally, emotionally, physically stable and all stuff off them, and then going off. Back to life, not going off on their life. So let's just preface that. So we had to get them to Germany, and then from Germany they would get back to the States and then get the help that they were needing. And my marriage is just a shamble, Absolutely. And just everything else. So we had our moments, but it was just a shamble. So I suck at the job. I can either do the paperwork or I can work with the person. If you ever met me, I'm that type of person. I'm like, if I'm in a meeting, I'm all about the person, but then the notes are bad. Or I'm totally not engaged and I'm just getting notes and I'm like, But they wanted me to do both. And I'm like, I can't do both. And they said, we'll train you. And that's the way it was fixed. I'm like, we'll train you. But it didn't happen. They kept training me and it was not happening. It just didn't sink in. Everybody has special giftings and whatnot. It didn't happen. So they sent me home early. That was a big argument and everything else. Met a cool commander, but
Yeah, and I believe this is the commander I talked to that said you could keep your job.
No, that was a chief.
Was that a chief?
And that's another base. So we've had many of those episodes.
Many, yeah.
So the chief goes over, and I get back home and sent home early. If anybody you guys are military, and if you're not, and you're following us, the military way of when you get sent home back early is they investigate, and then they see, did you get sent home early because of physical, mental, whatever? And they're like, oh, you got admin sent home. Like you couldn't do your job. So then they say, hey, go back to comm. And again, we're struggling in marriage. We're scared on what's next step. We have our arguments based on the external stuff. Whatever comes from the boardroom comes in the living room and spills in the bedroom, and then all the other stuff with the 4 kids and everything else. And we're living in a state that we had some friends, but not a lot of friends. And it was like, ugh. So, the long story short is we had to get out of the service. So now we're out of active duty. And now we're like, we thought in our smart brains, more me than her. She kind of went with me. Yep, she's giving me that look. She's like, oh, hell yeah, I went with you, but hell no. So we thought, go into ministry. Boy, we're already jacked up. We're just going to go into ministry and do what God's called us to do. I had a calling in 2007, and I'm like, maybe the Lord's getting us out to go do what we're going to do. And maybe then we'll work on our marriage. Again, this is self-revelation, years later, but sheer stupidity in the moment. So long story short, we didn't get accepted. They wanted lots of money for us to raise and lots of people to be connected. When you move a lot and you have jobs that are usually onesie-twosie people, didn't happen. So I, in my stupidity and in my infancy, in a sense, I decided, I'm like, the Lord still wants us to go. We're going to make it happen.
I wasn't on board.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. And we didn't even get the opportunities. Like God closed down the door in so many different ways. Ministry says no. We got hosed because we were getting out early. So I was working on an educational plan to get out of service. If you ever meet Queen Kimmy, she is the queen of ClickFunnels, websites, and all those types of things. And me, I was trying to be a wannabe version of that. And since I couldn't finish the course, they took the money away. They ordered our checking account. So even things went worse. So
yeah, it's one of those situations that you think things can't get worse, and then it does. And it continued to be a version of just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Fiscally, relationally. I mean, it was like we were cursed. And I attribute that to bad choices. And, I take responsibility going along with it, but this is the person that was directing the ship.
Yep. So I was patching the ship. So
and we still had massive holes.
$900 coming out every 2 weeks. So if you're active duty, that's a lot of money as an E5. So you go from like a couple thousand, just about 1,000, 1,500, and then you're getting that every 2 weeks. So I had to go liquidate my thrift savings plan. That's a 401k for any civilian listeners. Then I found out I got a severance. So then that plus the 401k withdrawal and everything else, we're thinking more of me, she went with it, is like, we should be able to get this ship up and rolling and do it ourselves and get this now business up and rolling. We can't do it as a ministry. We'll do it as a business. We'll go hit churches and go bring love, in a sense, of people's marriages and our marriages in shambles. So
it kept getting worse because, stress tends to do that. So it was like one set of stress on compounded on another set of stress, compounded on another set of stress. So it's like these stress bricks were just building and building and building and building and building. And we're just ignoring it, trying to just survive, from moment to moment. But, you can't. Those things are just too insurmountable to sit there and they just start coming out.
Now, are we allowed to talk about 2012, 2013 when the culmination from both our sides came up?
Absolutely.
Okay, just want to make sure. See, I learned that one. I've done lives before and go over and throw her under the bus.
Come here.
So, see, growth. So, all right. So we get on in 2012. Michelle has to now expedite to intercept our furniture. She had 48 hours. She took all the kids. By herself, skyrocketed from Ohio to Arkansas because I couldn't leave, but the furniture was going out. So now I have to close out everything.
I didn't want the furniture in storage, so I'm like, I'm going to drive as fast as I can with 4 young. How old were the kids?
2012. Again, they were 4.5, 3, and about 2, and the twins. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Special.
William finally got out of a car seat and was in a booster. Faith was in a semi-booster. I remember those seats to this day. Those seats got ugly and disgusting.
They really did.
And then the twins were kind of in between the car seat and the booster. So, and then you still had at least 2 kids in diapers. One was sort of potty trained. Faith just like got it and boom, done. William took longer, but long story short, then you're driving thousands of miles.
About thousands of miles.
Yeah, driving all down to Arkansas and everything else, and then boom, she's taking over. I got 2 more weeks left. I think it's over. I'm done. I'm just going to be a veteran. I got told I could become a reservist. I had a reserve recruiter live across the street from me. That was just God's providence.
Absolutely was.
So we get down there and we're like, all right, we at least be able to leverage something and everything else. So we got down there in May. Our money cut off in July. We basically bootstrapped money in from TSP and then a severance. And then we had about $20,000. And we were like, all right, we should be able to get this up and going.
No, you were like that.
Well, I brought it. She agreed, but it was a passive agreement.
It was a passive agreement because he was pretty controlling in that season. And no matter if I brought up a concern, it was an argument to follow. And I was so beat down by all the arguments that it was easier for me just to agree and say nothing. Hello, Diane, I love you.
So Michelle's fancy words is Michelle acquiesced.
I did acquiesce.
See, I'm learning words too.
I am so proud of you.
Because she has 117 verbal IQ. She just like the dictionary words got downloaded, but So she would acquiesce, or she would cuss me out, and then we would just go through like this type of thing, and then I would win because I argued and debated my whole life, and I have very strong convictions.
And I had no self-esteem to stand up for myself either in that season.
Yep. So we just went along. So we trucked through, and in about 2.5 months, we hit about 250 churches. We were pretty aggressive. So at that time, we were doing marriage ministry to churches. We're thinking I'm going to say she acquiesced. So I brought the plan of we. It was more like we and dragging the I. And 3,000 churches, you hit 300, 10% rule of sales. Hey, if I hit 30, when he gets that way, go grab a sharp utensil and start cooking. That doesn't fear me in that particular regard. Down, but thanks for the humor. Because she's done that before. She stares at you and chops. It's
awesome.
That part is scary.
As long as you're holding your knife correctly, you can cut all day long and you won't chop off your finger, but it's fun to see Israel.
We'll talk about another story another time that she did do that at work, and then she texted me like my fingers chopped off.
Oh, with the mandolin, that was.
We'll get there. Okay. So we got down there in 2012, and I tried to aggressively hit 250 churches in about a 2.5 month span. Phone call, email, foot tromp, and everything else. It's like, that's what you do in the military. You go over and get rolling. It worked. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. No, it worked. But everybody was like, no, hell no, yes and later. And the thing was even the ones that were yes and later that could have been something, it was too long. It was like 6 months. Hey, we're going to replan in March. You're down there in May or June, July. Oh, we got to get through Christmas. We'll look at it in February and everything else. So the few that got accepted, and I even had a sweeter girl that I hired short term to make phone calls because we were at least certified as behavioral consultants. So we had sort of an idea, and I'm like, hey, dominant, inspiring. Well, actually I'm more inspiring dominant. Mm-hmm. But if you take a guy that's wearing combat boots, khaki pants, and a button down shirt, going into churches telling you how much your ministry sucks and how much you need me. Again, I was arrogant. And you wonder why I'm getting like, yeah, sure, I'll give that card to my pastor buddy.
Yeah, no, those cards didn't leave those front desks. Yeah. Basically, all of his efforts came back pretty fruitless. Mm-hmm. And we even had other stress because other churches we were trying to attend turned into toxic cesspools to the point that, and I will never dime out an establishment or a church, but this church accused my husband of child abuse to the point of calling a CPS. And it was unsubstantiated. Nothing happened with it. But I mean, it was so toxic that, and I hit a literal breaking point. When I'm about to talk about, I'm not proud of, but I'm not ashamed of either. And I'm willing to speak about this to anybody. So if anybody thinks, this is shameful, and please track with us. I had 2 suicide attempts in Arkansas because the stress and the verbal abuse, and it just all culminated into a massive mental break. And it took 2 inpatient stays to get me back stable and quite a bit of medication to get me back. Now, you know, this many years later, I'm not on meds anymore. I'm out of stress. We have a great marriage. That stuff is in the complete past, but it plays into this history because that is the point that we were at. Absolutely the point we were at. I was at, and he was no healthier either. He just didn't act out like I did.
Yeah. So when you look at the diagnostic statistic manual, because I studied that and worked for that for 2 years, I was just broken. So if I said I was ADHD, I only have 4 out of 7 symptoms. You're not clinically diagnosable. I went to this angry group at one of the churches, but we were so angry as a group.
So angry that they just
we dissolved. We were so angry as a group, we couldn't form as a group. So we had to migrate to the codependent group. Hey, America,
it's great to see you.
So that angry group becomes a codependent group. So now the angry guys and girls couldn't go over and handle the codependent group because everybody's like, blah, 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 blah. And we're like, we need to get it out there. And we're like, we didn't have that freedom. So we tried different things and whatnot, but it came to a culmination, and still I was that stupid. I'm like, it's her stuff, and I go help her fix herself and everything else, and I go be her functional savior, as some people from the Christian faith would say, in that particular regard. And I thought I could fix it. So Michelle, then we moved because Arkansas totally crashed.
I was at a mental point because not only this, my home wasn't even safe. And let me set this picture. We moved into a beautiful apartment in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was gorgeous. I mean, a beautiful, like, granite and beautiful, but they didn't put any insulation in the walls on the thing. So every time we would walk, it would piss off the neighbor downstairs. And then basically I was told by the management, you need to sit down and shut up and have your kids color all day because you're making too much noise. I'm like, I am just existing. Now that I know that's what's flipping illegal, I could have sued the crap out of her for that treatment. But at that time, I didn't know that. So I didn't have peace in my home. I didn't have peace in my church. I didn't have peace in my marriage. I couldn't walk around my own dang apartment with 4 small kids. I mean, I told Danny, I'm like, we need to just get rid of everything and go. And I had amazing family. Yeah, it was, I mean, 4 kids. I mean, you're going to have some background noise, and what they did to us was completely illegal. Like I won't even go on that tangent.
So we also then struggled with almost homelessness. Yep. So right before we moved into that apartment, this was the before, we get down there, I try to be a hero. I'm a 0. I didn't get any money. We got down to 6 weeks left, and I'm like, I need to start applying for jobs. I was looking, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just very aggressive when I do stuff. I was looking at 1,000 jobs a day, applying for 2 to 20 jobs a day.
Yeah.
That was that on average, or more depending on there. So I was doing that, and then after I would do those items, then I would go do other business stuff because I'm like, unless they have a call or anything else, there's really no point.
Yeah.
Because unemployment says, have you looked and whatever applied for 3 jobs? I said I did that by Monday, and that was at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, so the good thing is we got unemployment, but we got down to basically $300-400.
Yeah.
And again, I'm still not broken on the part of me and my wife. We'll get there. But so I'm like, Lord, what are we going to go and do? We're down to $300. We went to one agency and they basically said like, well, you have too much money in your account? And I'm like, I said, my rent's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, we're like, we have too much money in our account. But when everything pulls out, we're going to be so low. We're like, no, we can't do anything because you physically have that cash. So I'm like, I don't get it.
I asked him, could I buy a Snickers and come back? I'm like, I'm $2,005. So I'm like, I'm $5 above. And I'm like, the rent's coming out tomorrow. So if you do the math, it's going to be gone. So I'm like, well, we can't help you. So you'd have to get back in line, go for 3 hours into there, and then find out, hey, we can give you $75. We tried to go tap resources in Arkansas to help them down to $300. I'm like, Lord, I don't know what to go over and do. I have no other money coming in and everything else. And then crying in my hand, I get a notification on my phone, or my wife tells me or something. I don't remember the exact, but I remember looking at my phone and I'm like, a deposit. Well, praise Jesus. It's about $700. So I'm like, and then found out I was disabled veteran. I went through the process when I got out, but I'm like, I didn't think I was that broken. And I'm actually pretty broken.
Yeah.
You know, not in the sense of
60% now?
It's 60% now.
Yeah.
But at the time it was 40%. So I'm like, praise the Lord. And then jobs started calling, and then we started to get out of it. And then we were doing really well, and then the girls were getting disability because they're developmentally delayed and disabled, and we were starting getting on the positive upswing. So, you think that, okay, you start to be like, hey, if positive things happen, the marriage is going to get better.
Finally making some headway in the positive direction.
Yep. And it was a Band-Aid because we didn't deal with the deeper stuff. So in that particular regard, we kind of masked, more me than her, and then things got sort of better. And then we moved into a better place because like, hey, we're making so well.
We were in Washington. Again.
Kudos to them, not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, this was the DC job, right?
No, this is that. So I worked at several companies. I'm not going to name names. I worked at an IT company, 5 months making that money, getting my disability, finally coming back as a reservist, get staff sergeant pay plus annual tour, and then even double dipping because they they allowed you to go, and that was the cool part. I got to double dip, on annual tour. Always loved that. And long story short, I worked 12 hours a day for 7 days and then off for 7 days. I'm like, hey, we could actually get this up and rolling. It could take a few more years. I need to get smarter. I need to go do things a little slower and everything else. I need to go over and get a clue. But now we have enough revenue to say, hey, we can do it as an overflow. That was like the only thing I think I got a clue at that time.
Absolutely.
So that part, my wife was like, oh, you're finally making some sense. So things got a little better. And we got to that point. We worked the 84-hour week. I'm toasty. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I was working from 7 o'clock at night until 7 o'clock in the morning. Get home, ride my electric scooter. Arkansas does get cold, so wear gloves. So I get home and everything else, and 2 hours later, they're like, hey, Daniel, how you doing? And I'm like, it's work. They're like, oh, the recruiter. And it's like, what are you calling for? Oh, did you hear about the split? I said, yeah, I know this company's splitting because they want to do this type of business and this type of business. They're like, well, they deleted your position. What? I said, deleted my position. I just finished it 2 hours ago. They're like, yeah, we decided to do that, so we're going to have to let you go. And I said, but you still have the position with the other company. They're like, yeah. They're like, well, you would have to re-interview for the entire process. What? So I got to go over. No. I'm like, this is BS. I said, I'm not going to go interview for the entire process when I was doing the job and I was about to get hired 30 days later. They said, hey, I was on track to go from temp to hire. So after that, we were like, all right. And then the same thing happened again. Now we fast track the jobs, 1,000 jobs a day, go look at 2 to 20 jobs to go and applying, connecting, networking. Facebook wasn't that popular then. So you didn't have those, hey, I got a homie G job. So you'd have to use Craigslist or LinkedIn or whatever. Well, not LinkedIn, but Craigslist and Indeed and everything else. We scrambled and we're like, we don't want to be here anymore. It is spiritually exhausting. It's mentally exhausting, everything else. And we weren't even looking at our own junk. We're just like, hey, the external
everything
stuff
that we're interacting with, from employment to churches to people, just was horrendous.
So long story short, I got a job at another company, but it was out of state. We're like, hey, our friends in Washington are like, come back, we'll take care of you.
And they financed us getting back. They are our dear friends. We still know them. I've known them. They're some of my dearest people I know.
Yeah. So they financed us and everything else.
We drove.
Yeah. So we drove and everything else. We sold as much as we could. So if you ever come to our house, it's humble beginnings wherever you go. And I like selling stuff anyway. But I've had to learn that one. But
yeah, I'm not a fan.
Oh, I love selling.
I'm good.
Anyway, so she's good. I'll just sell stuff that's my own.
Yeah, yours. You can sell it.
Yes. So I've learned that one too. So we get there. We move into somebody's little rinky-dink house. It was actually
the best place.
It was the best place. It was 500 square feet, easy to manage. All 4 kids could still fit in there.
They can go outside.
They had 1.5 acres of land, and I'm thinking, like, I could finally get ahead. We then go get landed 4 to 6 weeks later. They're like, oh, it was free. And then they're like, no, now you have to pay X amount a month. And I said, I can't go do that and then try to find a place and do the first month, last month, and go pay you when I'm just getting out of this almost homeless hell. So then we had to scramble, go over and move. I'm traveling across the nation too with this job. So I'm going from place to place to place, working with the Navy, working with the Marines.
We had enough money to actually rent a house.
Yeah.
A really nice house. And so I remember signing the lease and we're like, oh, finally we have a home. This is not an apartment. This is a home, and it's not our home, but it's somewhere where we can put our head down and the kids can be kids and do what they're going to do.
Yeah. And I remember all the addresses, so if you ever want to know them. So we lived in this house that had like 60 types of plants, had a koi
that was
pond.
a nightmare. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever rented a house, but like this house, like we look at it online, but it had like so much unspoken stuff. It had a pond with
koi
pond, which some people think that's a blessing. It was a massive curse. I don't. No. And it had like palatial amounts of plants. Like, I'm not a gardener. No.
So we got there a month later. I'm in DC. This is a nationwide story if you want to look it up. So I'm in DC and I'm working with these two guys. Both have the same first name. Both are the same ethnicity. Both, one from the Army, one from the Navy, and everything else. And it was hard for me to get confused. It was like maybe even differences. It's like, okay, I didn't know them that well. I was only working a few days with them. So I would know when I was working with them, but if you hear somebody's name, you don't know. So one guy was like very pompous, arrogant, pimping for chicks, that type of guy, single, traveling, making money and everything else. Other guy's really quiet, reserved. Everybody's a little angry about the company because of the way the company structure works, with the sense of, hey, you're supposed to be getting 8 hours. No, you only get this many hours. California people get the 8 hours, but if you're from another state, you don't. And hey, you get a per diem, but it's in the rear and everything else. So I'm just happy for whatever, but have an integrity issue too, because of, hey, if I'm working an hour, I'm gonna claim an hour. The guys got mad because I'm like, you shouldn't be claiming that. You need to claim 8. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. So I get sent back home to Arkansas. I go to Arkansas for drill. I'm waiting to get free from there to go back to Washington. They're like, hey, Faust, and the company's cool. They're like, hey, Faust, go home and work in Washington for like 3 to 6 weeks so you can actually be with your wife and commute home every day. Cool.
Nice.
The first day back, and I was just with those two guys Friday and a couple other people on the team. The Monday comes over, working in the job, and then they say, hey, so-and-so company in this place had a shooting at the DC Naval Yard, and then they mentioned the company, and I'm like, I was just at the DC Naval Yard. They mentioned the company. I work for that company. And then they mentioned the guy. I'm like, I worked with that guy. It was the quiet one. Put 3 assault rifles together, went over and popped 12 people in a matter of a few minutes, and then eventually got shot himself. And
he would have been working with him.
If I didn't have drill, I would have worked with him.
He may not be here talking to you today.
Yeah, literally. And usually he was the guy that finished up with me during those few weeks I was in DC. So I'm like, boom, setting that done. So then they say, go home today. And then they got rid of the company. They laid everybody off.
So now we signed a lease for a house. We thought we had stability, and now we're unemployed. Again. It's just like, it felt like the never ending cycle. No matter what my husband did, every road was to failure. No matter how hard he worked, no matter how many jobs he looked at, no matter what type of job he landed.
At Arkansas, I had 6 at one point.
And people have looked at my husband and said, you're irresponsible. You jump from job to job. This is all your fault. And without asking, like, what happened? Like, that is not my husband's fault. That is, my husband can't control somebody taking those things into a place and ending people's lives.
Or going over and not counting computers right, or they don't do their budget and they downsize, or whatever it is, or like, hey, we're just gonna not give you work anymore because you're on military orders for a couple months, and then drop that off. So that job went again. So second job now gone, scrambling to go look again.
Absolutely.
And around that time, we got one more awesome job. I had 2 jobs competing. My wife's like, don't go over and do that. They kept going up, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, and 17 to 18. This is the culmination of when the transformation happened. So we're there. Basically, it happened like May or June. They said it was going to be 6 months. They wanted to hire me on as a supervisor, but then they said, oh, you're a reservist. We don't think we can hire you as a supervisor. So then I have to get ESGR in. So if you're a reservist, ESGR is the Employment Services for Guard and Reserve. You definitely want to leverage that if your employer is like pulling the card, hey, you can't do this because you're a reservist or a guardsman.
That's not legal.
I had to call them, and I called them out on the dime, and then they called me back like, oh, that's not what we meant. It's because your schedule, and we want consistency. Okay, will you take a $3 raise and not supervise? Yeah, sure. So got the $3 raise, didn't have to supervise. Cool, went from now 18 to 21, and now I'm working in another city in Washington. Go over, and it's the culmination. It's all the buildup, all the stress, everything else, like all these other things. And then around June 1st, we were trying to go through marriage counseling. People at our church thought we were irresponsible. Yet the financial guy at the church is like, it's not irresponsible, it's income. If you don't have enough income, you can't pay anything.
Literally, we have budgeted. Well, I mean, at that point, we were running a budget. Like every single dollar had a destination, or everything. We weren't going out, we weren't eating out, we were living as lean as possible. And people were still, especially from church people, were still telling my husband, hey, you're in sin, you're not doing this right. They wouldn't even advocate for us to get a divorce. I mean, like we had no one like advocating for us, supporting us, encouraging us. We were literally marooned from any kind of semblance of like we belong in a place.
Yep. So basically, in that particular point, it was her birthday, worst day. So technically, like if you have to choose to be the scum of the earth, I guess do that day on the person's birthday, but it's not like my active choice.
It was. I don't think you cognitively chose that.
I basically called. I got really stressed while I was in between work outside. I remember being outside that day. It was sunny, and I threatened her divorce. And I mean, legitly, like, hey, I'm gonna leave and everything else, and da. You know, got convicted sort of when I was, you know, fiscally, which again, it's just, hey, that's where I was at. And that part, I was like, I was scum at that point. I'm like looking at it from a financial thing. You know, if I go do this, I'm going to do this. So, but then come home and my wife is like, all right, she's like a teapot and she can take a lot, and a lot, and a lot, and a lot.
I stuff everything down.
Yeah.
And then it's like a little explosion where
it's
like, you know, it's those cartoons where like the little feather falls down and it like makes the whole thing like, collapse.
So that night was the spiritual nut kicking of a lifetime for me. 3 hours at least, I'm going to say longer, and about 3 days of this. And she just lays it all out there. And usually she's not a memory person, but when she's angry, oh yeah, dates, time, service, what you were wearing, did you have a floss pick in your mouth, whatever those types of things, everything. And for me, I'm highly visual. So when she went that way, I felt the Lord actually leading that way on how much I sucked and how much I needed Jesus. That was my original testimony of how I became a Christian. And now I'm doing that in marriage, in the bedroom, in the sanctuary of our place and everything else. I remember the bed. I remember we kept going in and out of the bedroom. I remember the black bed and everything else. We had a sleep number bed. We initially liked it, but now we hated it.
No, I hated the frame.
Hated the frame.
Because you picked out the frame and I didn't get to look at the frame, and I was like it's like an eyesore the whole time. I'm so glad it's gone.
It was drawers underneath. I thought it was gorgeous.
It was awful.
But anyway,
it's gone.
So the metal frame like that was actually probably the worst one you've got.
Yeah.
Not good. So I like metal frames. It's just me.
I just don't.
Anyway, so that was it. But for me, it really, and I don't cuss too often, but it's social media. I had everything ass backwards.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. I went over, and like most of us, we get our doctorate degree in our education and for our job, and then we give a GED of time and energy to our spouse and to our kids.
Yep.
So I've had to go over and basically rewire everything that went me. I had to rewrite the story in a sense, and that's why we named it Rewrite the Story, because if I didn't, I'm going to lose this precious jewel of a wife. I'm going to lose 4 kids. It's going to be a legacy part.
Your history is going to repeat.
Yeah.
Your history is absolutely repeat. And at the same time, I'm going through a process of reading a bunch of books, looking at, and I think it was the same time frame, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So reading a bunch of books, getting spiritually healthy, and realizing that I can't make my husband happy. Now, I've been trying hard to get him to be pleased and happy, and no matter what I do, it's not gonna work because he was just in that mindset. But I needed to be okay that I'm perfect the way that I am, regardless of what he thinks. And then my attitude to him turned towards, I'm not gonna absorb your negativity anymore. And if you're pissed off at me, that's your problem, not mine. Now, it was absolutely.
That's like one of her key words.
And very, 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 how do I put this?
I'm going to be right back. I'm going to check on kiddos.
Yeah, he's checking on kiddos, but little by little, my self-esteem started growing. And as I wasn't relying on my husband for the sole source of, my life and everything, I started to get mentally better. I started being able to be a better mom and a better wife, and learning how to cook and learning how just to act in a way with my husband that was not completely, utterly codependent, that I was an independent person. Oh, look, I'm not independent anymore. Come back. No.
The kids are choosing the movie because we went later. So.
Okay, it's fine.
All right.
That's fine. But anyways, we both were at a place of transition because we had a choice either to transform or implode, because this was not a healthy situation. It wasn't a healthy situation for the kids. It wasn't a healthy situation for me. It wasn't a healthy situation for him. But together,
I was the ranting dad, so I mean,
you're still a ranting dad. Let's not change that. I really think you should make a podcast called The Ranting Dad. I think it would go great.
All right.
But we
1,000 views and 100 shares.
Oh
I'll do the podcast.
The ranting dad. I love
ranting
it. I love it. But basically, to have true transformation, you have to not just rely on the other member to do the transformation, that you both, to transfer your marriage, both have to put in the effort to individually transform and come together within your transformation to bring something new together. And then my husband started doing this weird thing that completely freaked me out. Like, I would not be very nice to him. Because when he would try to show me love, I would not know how to receive it.
Yeah, once the spiritual nut kicking happened, it went the exact opposite.
And when I wouldn't know how to receive it, so I would act negatively and act out. And he's like, I love you anyways. You could do anything and I'm still gonna love you. And he would still love me. Like, he would still give me things and do things for me that I'm like, I don't deserve this right now because I have been horrible to you. And through that process, it rebuilt the trust between me and him. And I think that's when our marriage really started to be a marriage and not just two angry, broken people like trying to coexist and just be one fight away from, oh, I'm just going to divorce you, eliminate you. I don't need you. This is ridiculous. Because it was ridiculous.
It was completely asinine.
So, and we had kids. I mean, this is not healthy for them either. I mean, not at all.
Yeah. So about 5 years of active work, obviously got better to a certain point when we got to Arizona. It was drastically different in Arizona. Miss you all in Arizona. Oh. So that's where we want to move back to. So reading everything, Bible, marriage books, everything else, the whole nine. And then now the calling I had in my life to teach the world better relationships is now an outpouring of my marriage, because instead of getting a GED of my spouse, I go pursue a doctorate degree in my spouse.
Like, he's my most important subject. And I know that sounds really campy and weird, but like, if I can understand my husband.
You say campy or clampy?
I said campy. Campy.
Clampy.
If I can make this relationship work, then everything else out of my life, including my children, including my business relationships, including my friends' lives.
Including Donna and Erica and Queen Kimmy.
Yay!
And anybody else watching?
I mean, everybody is going to benefit from this, from the energy we produce with each other, just our dynamic. I mean, and honestly, I want my children to have successful marriages. I want their lives to be successful, and I want them to have an example that my husband and I didn't have. Both of our parents are divorced, and my parents were an example of two people that should never have gotten married and should never have had kids.
Well, the Lord used the blessing of that.
I'm not saying that I shouldn't exist, but I'm saying we did not have an example how to make this work.
No, we didn't. So transformation started to happen. And then, as I was saying earlier, doctorate degree in your spouse, most investment. Because a doctorate degree, because I have education background, I'm actually an education training manager. I've had several jobs since that, but that's the most extensive one I've had. In 7 years, your degree plan changes. So if you ever gone to college and taken too long and everything else, it just changes, and the world changes rapidly. Computers are now every 6 months to a year on a change and everything else. And then we go over and we invest into all the stuff that changes. Facebook could change like no tomorrow. Clubhouse is now taking over. Everybody's building social media.
I mean, even in an employment situation, I mean, you will give 20 years to get an employment, and you will tolerate a boss, you will tolerate coworkers, you will tolerate these most commonly toxic work relationships. Yet get a spouse, which should be your greatest investment, because they're usually the father or mother of your children and the person that you've committed yourself to.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy just to eliminate them. Why is it that we can tolerate people at work, but we eliminate our spouses? I mean, at work, you're going to be replaced. I mean, literally.
Do you need hydration, man?
Nope. Right. I mean, why do we put more investment into somewhere where we're completely and utterly replaceable more than the relationship that it's supposed to be irreplaceable? I mean, if this guy dies, you know, obviously he could be replaced. I don't ever want that. Or if I die, my husband needs to replace me so the kids eat quality food and not just eat out all the time.
Yeah.
No, your strengths lie other places.
We're going to have to up the insurance so we can afford the food.
Oh, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. So we put the doctorate degree, that's written in our book, Leave No Marriage Behind. And then the bachelor's degree invested into your kids. Absolutely. And then the associates in your work. And not saying you just go over and get an associate's degree and go to work. It's the level of investment that you put in there.
Now, for different seasons of life, there's going to be different investments. Like if you're just trying to get out of debt or you're on the brink of homelessness, that jobs, like me and my husband worked at 2 jobs together in Phoenix. And we worked at a ballot place, and then we worked making tasers. And you know, for that season, that was fun. Such a different job titles. But for that season, we didn't interact as husband and wife very much because the priority was we need to get money in the bank account so we can make things happen. But that was just a season. You know, our priority is our marriage, number 1, our children, number 2, which some people will bristle over, but I beg to differ that if your marriage isn't good, your kids aren't going to be good.
Yeah.
So,
and then pretty much in that regard, things started transforming, things started going over and changing and everything else. And then now the outpouring. So that's the people that have met me. They're like, how can you go do all these things? I'm like, well, I have a supportive, awesome wife, you know, and then God's blessing the skills and everything else. It's like, how can you do 3 podcasts and do a TV show and everything else and go over and do radio and all these other things? I'm like, well, when your spouse is behind you and you're making that investment the most, that's when transformation happened and change. Then she actually wanted on board. She actually asked this week, she's like, I wanted to come on. And I'm like, I did not expect that. You know, she's like, I want to do it. I'm like, because I asked her a couple of years ago and then she kind of did it and then she kind of left.
I really wasn't in it. I was in it because he wanted me to be in it. And I've learned to only do things that I want to do. And I know that sounds a little selfish, but if it's not something coming internally from who I am and inside, it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to real. It's not going to last.
And we're not talking about cleaning the toilet.
No. You know. There's stuff I don't want to do all day long, and I do. But I mean, like this type of thing. I don't mean that either. I
don't want to get dressed in the morning and the shower doesn't need to be scrubbed. I'm not doing either. Yeah. So that balance in that regard. So, and I know I say so often.
You really do.
I really do. But it's alive and you'll love me anyway or hate me. Whatever. So long story short, that is how they deal with the raw. And if you guys have any questions or want to know more about it, either watching the live or watching the replay, either on Facebook, the Marriage Superheroes Facebook page, YouTube, or Periscope, which is slowly going away. So if you're a social media person, Periscope, pretty much gone soon. And then Twitch. But we would love to go over and to serve you in this capacity. So when you're in the bedroom, your story might be quote unquote broken. Your story might be on the edge. Your story might be everywhere else. We've almost been homeless 3 times.
We've almost been homeless. We've had twins in the NICU. We've had intrauterine surgery. We've had kids almost die on us. We've had job losses.
For the past month. That was fun.
I mean, we've had some massive things and massive stressors, and we have survived. And I'm not saying our stress is over. I mean, we're still alive. Things still happen. And you know, I'm just glad that whatever happens, you know, we are a team no matter, you know, what happens.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then when you're both a team and you both find your Kazone, CHAZOWN, which is your calling, your dream, and your destiny, it makes it even easier now as you're working that doctoral degree in your spouse, in learning them. And again, you can learn more from our book, Leave No Marriage Behind, or listen to our podcast or anything else. We just want you to get to a place that you're thriving.
And just realizing that just because things might look bad, now obviously we're not telling you to stay for physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse. I mean, if you're in an abuse situation, don't stay there, get out. But if you're in a situation like my husband and I was a lot of miscommunication and immaturity, but if you just keep going and working on it and working on yourself, that it can get better, because year 7 looked totally different. It's not even the same marriage. It's not, we're not the same people. It's like I married a different person, because we're not physically, I mean, I'm physically the same person, but from every practical level, my attitude.
I got a new face.
You got older. So you got a new hair color too. You're going gray, so am I.
Hey, if anybody wants to dye it fully gray for me, including the brows, I love to try.
No, don't do it, because he wanted to do it just for men, but gray. And I told him, I'm like, it's gonna look great the first day, but then when the roots come in, it's gonna look horrendous. So I don't know.
I would do it for 1,000 likes and 100 shares.
Oh man, nobody's gonna dye your hair gray, man, because you gotta have the texture with it too. It's gotta be all like straw.
I think Donna would. She dyed her hair red. I don't know.
That's not gray. That's totally different.
Donna, find just for men backwards for me, please.
No, that's not a thing. It's not a thing.
Hey, people put pink streaks in for the cure. Yeah. So in conclusion, we love you guys. We hope this was fruitful for you. Thank you for all the watches. Thank you for all the hearts. If you want to get this message out there the most, thumbs and likes on Facebook doesn't go that far. The algorithm actually stronger with the loves, the cares, and everything else. So whoever you're serving on Facebook, if you don't have the money to do any services or uplift them up, go over and put a comment in there like Queen Kimmy, Nerica, and Donna put in. Go over and put loves and cares. If you want this message to go over and to pass on, then go over and pass on.
And if you guys have any questions, like obviously we just shared a whole bunch of stuff on this feed.
And there still was a lot missing.
And there was still a lot missing, but we are open books. Like there's no such thing as, a unique situation. I mean, we've been through a lot. We're willing to either talk to you privately or, answer your questions on, the feed if you have them, and just connect with you guys on a in a personal basis.
Yep, and we're going to share the comments real quick just so everybody can get acknowledged. Again, Queen Kimmy goes over and for funnels and everything else.
She's fantastic.
She's also on Clubhouse, so if you want to connect on her. Donna is the Metter Effect.
Yep.
It's going to help you affect your life.
They are a power. Donna and her husband are some of the most magnetic, crazy people, amazing people I've ever met. Like
with guitar.
Yeah. No, I got to actually spend a few days in their orbit this last weekend, and I will say that they are absolutely transformative people that you cannot stay sad with them. Like the husband's got so many fantastic stories, and she is just the sweetest, most amazing person.
Yep.
Like, we love you.
And Nerica goes over and works with entrepreneurs. She also works with veterans. She's going to have a show on the ISHE network and also Guiding Star. Donna will have a show with ISHE. Queen Kimmy will have a show, The Boss Effect, or she might be rebranding the name, on ISHE and Guiding Star Veteran TV Network. More to follow as we get the logistics done.
Absolutely.
And it's just some of the people. And even if you're on here new, we'd love to go over and to uplift you as we get to know you and everything else. So our heart is for you to transform from the bedroom to the boardroom. No more going over and saying, hey, I need to transform for the job, because the average person that applies for a job, and I've learned this as fact, is about 2,500 people that go and apply. And then you have the APS to go and filter and everything else. And then the average person leaves within 4 years of a job. So we rather go over and help you transform your life. So no matter where you go, from different bedrooms in a sense of moving, or different living room sense of moving, and even jobs in the boardroom, that your overall central.
If you have a strong marriage, a strong family, anything could happen and you're going to be okay, because you have the foundation built with your spouse.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what happens. Now, obviously we want good things to happen, but life is life and things happen, and everybody, is not immune to the stresses that comes with it.
Yep.
But yeah,
So with that, thank you for going and watching War Hero to Superhero, helping military, veterans, and first responders transform their lives from the bedroom to the boardroom. And we want to thank our sponsors that go over and serve us well. So all have a good day.
Millions of men and women have served this great country. However, over 40,000 veterans sleep on the streets every night. 20 veterans commit suicide on any given day. Veterans have been left without medical services while they suffer from mental illness and addiction. They are dying alone. Join Armory Dog and the Veterans Project to help serve this forgotten community of heroes. Veterans is a place for our men and women who have served our great country, giving them a place to stay and rehabilitate in a safe and positive environment. Please help support the Veterans Project so that these men and women can get back on their feet and find their purpose for living. The Veterans Project will house 10,000 veterans, getting them off the streets, back into society, and utilizing their skills as they once used to serve our great country. Veterans Not Forgotten. Join us.